every day in trucking, what I learn is that great trucking companies that deliver a good service and a great solution, there's always room in the market for them.
Welcome back. As humans, what we feel doesn't always match up with reality, and that's something that stood out to me in recent months as we patiently wait for the trucking recession to fully fade away. We could talk numbers all day, and we do sometimes, but it's reality on the ground that really matters, which is why we're bringing in Sean Dehan to bring it all into focus. Sean is the VP of Corporate Strategy at Truckstop, and he joins us now. Sean, thanks for joining us.
Guys, it's a pleasure to be here.
And congratulations, I guess, are in order, right, as well. This is the 30th anniversary, I
You
think, of
got it.
Truckstop.
Yeah. I didn't even have to bring that one up. Thank you for doing that. 30 years. Yeah. I usually like to say that, freight is a place where you meet a lot of lifers in transportation. And it's hard for me to sit on a panel or talk to other people and be the guy that's been in freight for the longest amount of time. So I tend to just rest on the laurels of Truckstop, who's been at it for 30 years, and I can usually at least be in middle of the pack with a 30-year anniversary mark. So we're pretty excited. It's been a long and fun run for Truckstop, and our mission is to find a better way for everyone in the industry. And I think looking forward to finding a better way for another 30 years. So hopefully in 30 more years we'll have that 60th anniversary, and we'll be excited about that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you guys look for better ways, we're looking for better days, I think, with regard to the freight market.
Yeah.
And there really, as I kind of said there a moment ago, I think there are two sides to this coin these days that I'd like to talk to you about. And again, we talk with your colleague Brent Hutto every week for the latest spot market data. But I'd like to start with how people are feeling out there amid the grind, and it has been a grind for quite a while now. Truckstop and Bloomberg recently released results of a survey of owner operators and small fleet carriers, and kind of surprising, maybe not totally surprising, but somewhat to me, the majority, it seems like are pretty optimistic, at least about the short-term future, right?
Yeah.
Tell us about what we learned from all this.
Yeah, it is an interesting one. I'll give you kind of the facts real quick, and then maybe I'll give you some op-ed as I look at it and kind of talk to customers, hear from customers, and of course the survey. So, I think what we found, unsurprisingly, a lot of people thought that tariffs would hurt the industry. About 65% said that tariffs would hurt the industry. But I hold that thought for a second, because in a minute you're going to be like, huh, these two things don't quite match up. 65% think tariffs are going to hinder the industry, specifically like actually hurt it, hurt volumes, hurt trucking rates or whatever it may be. Um, but despite that, 62% say they're optimistic about sustained demand, and 55% think are bullish about rate growth. So 55%, that's only 5% more than half of people. But like the fact that half of people are pretty bullish about rate growth, despite the fact that tariffs are also something they think will impact the industry. It's sort of an interesting dichotomy of results, and that there's overlap in those two data points for our customers. And I think additionally, we're seeing more kind of optimism just around the business that the owner operators are in particular. 57% said they plan to stay as owner operators or leased on company drivers. And that's 7 points higher than we saw the quarter before. And, honestly, you'd think that with all the craziness that we're experiencing right now, we have tariffs, we don't have tariffs. China imports are down in the Long Beach by 60% one month over the other. You'd think that would wear people down a little bit after kind of 3 hard years, basically, at this point. But we're still seeing, folks that are committed to the cause and committed to staying on the road. And in trucking, they're probably not on the road this week, but they're committed to staying on the road, generally speaking. I think that we find that pretty interesting, because at the same time, as you know from talking with Brent a lot, market rates don't really show you that you should be particularly bullish right now.
Yeah, and I guess that's my question. And I think you kind of teased it there a moment ago, but the sentiment is, I wouldn't say overly optimistic, but cautiously optimistic. And I think
Yeah,
we've kind of been in that territory for a
agreed.
while now. The reality, though, and you brought up tariffs, because I think that's kind of the biggest elephant in the room right
Yeah,
now. And it's uncertainty is really what it's all about right now. We're not quite sure what's going to happen and where things are headed there. But the sentiment that you caught wind of through the survey and you're hearing from people out there, does it match up with what we're actually seeing there in the market and where we may be headed? How do you line those two things up, I guess is my
You
question.
know what's hard about sentiment, Scott, in this industry in particular, is you get a little bit of survivorship bias in the data, right? The folks that are answering your survey are the ones that have been able to stay on the road, which typically means that they probably have a decent business, right? They've got some good customers, they've got some good dedicated freight, and so you're always in a weird. It's kind of a weird dynamic in Truckstop's world. Typically, when a customer leaves us, they leave trucking or they leave being an owner operator. They go in to drive for a company, or they maybe just hang up the keys and leave the industry, or they put it on pause for a little bit. And so we don't hear their sentiment about why they left, right? They just sort of leave and they don't give us a lot of notice about it. But then we go to our existing customers, and the ones that have sort of stayed on the road probably have a reason for it. They might have a decent business that they're running, and they may have some good customer freight. And so we tend to hear from those types of survivors to begin with. And so they, generally speaking, I think probably have a predilection to being a little more optimistic. And that's sort of a thing you see, typically speaking, in sort of successful businesses. Is oftentimes a little bit of optimism is really important to sort of survive. But when we look at it like on the road, like literally rubber meeting the road, we hear from some customers that are still finding exceptional, freight, really good rates in certain pockets, and they're just sort of operating in what a lot of times are called honeypots or a lot of niches that they've really focused on. So you can certainly have a successful trucking company right now, and don't let me define what success is. Success for you may not be millions of dollars. It may be a really good life on the road, making the right amount of money for yourself, but they're having a really successful time achieving what they want to achieve. And I think others are struggling, and what they're often doing is leaving the market. And I think when we look at the data across the two, you know, freight market rates are not where you'd expect them to be for someone to be optimistic. They've just sort of like been flat. We got a little pull forward in March. There's so much freight data right now that you basically have to say you can't really look at that. Like you can't use that as a comp, right? COVID, we had to like wash that out and say you can't really use that as a comp. And now Trump is doing this little dance, this tariff dance, where it's causing a lot of months or weeks where you just say, there's a lot of noise there. Like, was that real or was that tariff pull forward? And so I think if I'm a trucker and I'm feeling this optimism, what ends up happening in this dynamic is that you're actually really important as a trucker, as a truck driver. Your sentiment is really important for how the industry goes. And unfortunately, right now, we're not seeing a lot of demand catalysts outside of really short-term catalysts like 90-day tariff pause with China will probably cause some pull forward. We would predict that there's pull forward going to come, right? By the time that 90-day pause is over, it's going to be August, right? And you don't really know, is that going to push higher? Is it going to push lower? Where is it going to land? And so people will probably do a little bit of a mixed bag on hedging around pulling forward some just in case things will get worse from here. So we expect a little bit of a spike there, but the optimism that people feel on the ground and on the road today probably means that we're going to follow along this bottom unless we see some meaningful demand change. And we don't see a lot of catalysts right now for demand change. And without demand change catalysts, you need capacity to change. You need the truck count to go down. And when you have optimism like you have right now, you don't forecast that truck count is going to go down meaningfully. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense, yeah.
Yeah,
Because I mean, realistically, you do need people to leave the industry for things to balance out a little bit.
you got
And
it.
what you're saying is that optimism may be keeping people in a little bit longer than they might feel completely comfortable with. But at some point, right, that dam has to break. If we
Yes.
continue scraping the bottom there, right,
Yes.
it can't go on forever. And I know you don't have a crystal ball. I'm not going to ask you for any predictions, but you know, to me, it seems when I look at this tariff situation, again, the uncertainty I think is the biggest factor here is that
Yeah.
people can't, these companies can't necessarily plan for the future very well because they don't know
Yep.
what the lay of the land is going to be like in 90 days or 6 months or whatnot. So I guess my question, and again, I know you don't have a crystal ball and I know you can't see the future. I don't think you can. That'd be nice if you could, but
Probably be in a different business if I could.
that's true. You'd probably be a lot richer too. I don't know how rich you are right now, but
Yeah.
um,
I'd be richer.
richer. There you go. Exactly.
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, the point is that at some point we can't just keep scraping the bottom here. So I guess what has to change for us to either, you know what I mean, start start raising, rising up here, or
Yeah.
hopefully not
Yeah,
going down. I
like you
don't think
said,
that's
I
a,
don't
a
have
good idea.
I can't predict anything, but I guess I can tell you sort of what I would track and what I would look at. And I think what a lot of the optimism that we had, I think we saw it come start in kind of November time period. That's when we first started tracking change and optimism. And I think a lot of people feel optimistic whenever there's change at the top of the country. There's always a little bit of an optimism that happens, typically speaking, even if it's not on your side, right? There's some sort of hey, there's change afoot. This type of change is good. It's the type of change we wanted. That's why the election went the way it went, right? We wanted this change. And so there was definitely some positivity around that. And I think that's probably we probably still have like a little bit of that buzziness around the optimism. And I think even just the moves that we've made since, China was all the way up here on the tariff side, and now it's kind of back to down here on the tariff side. And it's like, okay, this is sort of just the way our administration is going to operate, and like we can kind of norm to that. And I don't know about you, but I feel like we're sort of already norming to it a little bit because you hear a little less conversation about it. It's not as much of a common conversation at the dinner table or at out to eat with your friends, right? Like people are kind of getting normed to it. And so what you really need to see is some sort of consumer sentiment meaningfully change. And I haven't seen a big step change in sentiment, right? We got a little bump in November, kind of carried through. Tariffs sort of like put us down a little bit in the from a consumer sentiment perspective. And I think that until we see people really starting to say, hey, I'm really confident with going to Home Depot and buying that, those new cabinets for my kitchen and having that type of level of consumer sentiment of positivity, you're really not going to see a meaningful demand change. Now, what can throw a wrench in that? Hurricanes can throw a wrench in that. Natural disasters can throw a wrench in that. But other than that, consumer sentiment tends to be something that kind of climbs over time versus like just a one event causes it outside of the pandemic, which
Yeah,
hopefully we don't have
throw
to
that
live
out.
that again. Hopefully we
Yeah.
don't have to live that again to get some good consumer sentiment. So I think we'll have to see where the tariffs end up. I think the probably the most bearish view is that tariffs sort of stay where they're at today, and that does impact consumer purchasing, right? And consumers basically say, look, that thing I used to buy that was a little bit of a discretionary purchase is 25 to 40% higher than it used to be. And like it's just not worth it to me anymore to buy it. I'm gonna save my money as opposed to spending it on that. And maybe I'll save my money up for some period of time and make one big purchase as opposed to making a bunch of small ones. So I think that's probably the worst case scenario is that demand maybe even falls off a little bit because of the tariffs. I don't see a lot of demand catalysts. Then the question is, do you have capacity catalysts? Whether it be, and really the capacity catalyst in this scenario would be sort of a decline in capacity of some sort. And we're not, when we say capacity, we don't just mean the owner operator being the capacity. We mean like the whole market. There's private fleets, there's rail is capacity, right? There's all different ways that freight can move. And how does that capacity sort of get constrained? Interestingly, one of the things that you could potentially look at in capacities. Like rails are having a lot of tough time with cargo theft right now, like a huge issue with cargo theft. And so you might actually start seeing shippers all opt to not send on rail for higher value goods, pushing like demand into the freight and the over the road transportation market. That could be one trend you see. There's a number of other ways you could imagine sort of capacity. That's a demand trend, but other ways you can imagine capacity coming out. But I do think to your point, at some point in time we're going to have to see capacity start to like fall out a little further than it is today in one way or the other, whether it's rail, whether it's over the road, whether it's drayage, whether it's wherever the capacity needs to come out of.
Yeah, and as I hear you talking, I keep thinking back to a year ago, 2 years ago. I think I have my sense of time has completely been warped in recent years. But a couple years ago, a year and a half ago, it was the first quarter of 2024. We're going to
Oh
start to
man.
see things. Remember that we're going to
Oh
start to
yeah.
see
Oh, I
things
remember.
turn. Then it became a third quarter thing and a fourth quarter.
Yes.
Now we're into the second quarter of 2025, and we're still scraping along that bottom there. Um, are you optimistic that we're going to see this change in any significant way anytime soon based on everything you're seeing and everybody you're talking to?
I mean, I must say I was feeling optimistic in January. And I might have caught the bug a little bit. I might have gotten it might have been like a little wishful optimism. It's good
Sure.
for me, so I'm optimistic about it. But it's certainly my optimism has kind of cooled. But I don't think it's I don't think it's all bad news, right? Like that doesn't it doesn't mean that freight's not moving. There's still demand. There's still good freight out there. There's still good contracts out there to be had. There's still good customers out there to be had. And what I think one potential blessing that comes from something like this, a prolonged version of this, is that the capacity that remains in the market after all of this is should be the best capacity, right? In the end, right? The highest quality trucks, the highest quality truckers, the best operators. This is an operator's market, and if you can make it through this market and come out to the other side, you'll probably make some good money on the other side, right? And it's an operator's market, and I know I have a number of friends and customers who are operators in this market who are doing very well. Now, were they doing better 3 years ago? Yes, they were doing better 3 years ago. Who wasn't? But they're doing very well, all things considered. And, they're able to take the time they want off. They're able to work the time that they do. And, their mindset is just a little different. This is a little further afield from your conversation, but their mindset is they're very customer focused, right? They think about their customer. They really think about their business as a business. And they're focused on how do I best serve the customer? And then how do I win more from that customer? Because what I learn is that every day in trucking, what I learn is that great trucking companies that deliver a good service and a great solution, there's always room in the market for them. Always. Even if it's a tough capacity market, there's always room. And just because you're struggling right now doesn't mean you're not good, doesn't mean you don't have a good solution. It just it might be a good time for you to step back and think about your business from a more strategic perspective and say, what should I be doubling down on? Which customers have been really good to me this year? Who can I go back to for more freight maybe I'm in the, hurry of trying to find a load. I'm not working my relationships the way I want to. So those are great ways to sort of think about and surviving, if you will, or even thriving in a market that doesn't seem to have like a clear end date right now, right? Like
Yeah.
I can't tell you right now that by the end of 2025 we should be good to go, right? I don't have the optimism to say that.
Yeah, and I think that's great advice too. You know, you talk about building up those relationships and building up the networking, capabilities that you have right now really is the best. You have to do that right now for the most part if you want to be successful. And I think that's good advice anytime, right? Obviously,
Evergreen.
but
Yeah.
yeah, but especially for now. And you kind of read my mind because I was going to ask you, what you would say to those people out there who may be hanging on. They may, have been hanging on for a few months now and are optimistic or have been cautiously optimistic and maybe now are at the end of their rope. What advice do you have for those folks as they try to navigate all of this? And it may be as simple as, the thing you just said, continuing to
Yeah.
build those relationships.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's not to bank on the market. Don't bank on the market changing, right? If your business plan the whole thing requires the market to change in the next 3 months, then I would sit back down at the dinner table or in your recliner at home and rethink the business plan, right? Because that's just not hope is not a strategy, as they say, right? And we really can't just hope in 3 months that the market will be better. And so I think you really have to sit back and say, if I'm struggling right now, which a lot of people are, there's nothing wrong with you. It's not just a you thing. The market is challenging. But what is it that I can maybe do differently over the next 3 months that could position me, one, to make a little bit better income over the next 3 months, but also make better income over the next 3 months after that without the market changing, right? Because whatever you do today probably isn't going to give you fruit in a month. You're gonna have to plant a seed, water the seed and see it start to sprout. But by the end of that 3 month, 6 month period, maybe you've built a little bit of a different business that's a little more resilient, that has a little bit more consistent freight, and in lanes that you really, really want to run. So that's how I would think about it. Like, don't hope for the market. Step back a little bit from your business. Think about it. Think about where areas you can improve, your customer service, your customer relationship, your cost per mile, whatever it may be.
Great advice, Sean, and people can get more of that kind of advice, I guess, at truckstop.com, obviously. Any final thoughts here before we wrap things up?
Yeah, I mean, I think the last thing I'll say, just to kind of to piggyback on that idea of going to truckstop.com and finding kind of advice and opportunity, one. kind of related. And one reason I get like excited about this market is that we had a customer recently, and he was in I think like a 6 year Class A drivers, right? So he had been a company driver for about 6 years, and was running power only. And power only, that's a tough, that's harder generally speaking, and maybe a little less profitable as well. Sometimes just the load values aren't quite the same. Um, but and he was using some boards, some load boards. At the time, he wasn't using Truckstop, but he had just gotten his authority and made the jump over. And yeah, quite frankly, kudos to him. That's a gutsy move in this market to sort of leave the comfort of a company role and go out on your own. But he had thought through it, and he felt pretty comfortable with it. But what he found after 2 weeks was that he couldn't get loaded. Like no one would give him any freight, because think about it from a broker's position. They want to give it to carriers that they trust, the carriers that they know. And if you're a brand new authority, they don't know that you were a Class A driver for the last 60 years. They don't know your quality from before, right? And so they're a little skittish to give that to you, and you don't, and there's lots of frauds, so they're concerned about those types of things. And so he couldn't get moving, and he ended up calling up Truckstop and asked us if there was anything we could do to help him get moving. And, fortunate for us, we had listened to our customers about a quarter before, 3 months before, and we built out this functionality that enabled new authorities to search for freight based on authority requirement for the broker. So brokers will tell you it's 12 months, 6 months, 18 months, 2 years, whatever it may be, or we'll take anyone, right? New authorities welcome. And what happens, Scott, is that if you don't know the authority requirement from a broker and you're a new authority, you're going to call any load. You see a load on a load board, you're going to call it, and guess what? You're going to be on hold for 15 minutes, 5 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, and you're not going to find out for 15 minutes that you're not qualified for that freight to begin with. And then you're going to hang up the phone, and the other 10 loads that you were looking at, they're gone because someone took them. Because that's how quick things move off the board right now, because there's more capacity than there's freight. And so what he was able to do on the truck stop board when he got on was he was able to filter by what freight can I actually win. And he called us up. We showed him the demo. He was excited about it. He started using it, and he was loaded for 2 months straight. He had 2 months worth of loads in a row using that filter and feature. And so that speaks specifically to those lower tenured carriers. But even if you're a 1 year tenure, 2 year tenure, customers have told us that they're using that filter because if they've got 2 years tenure and there's a load and they only lets someone with 2 years tenure get it, it's not going to be a very easy load for a lot of people to call on, right? And so it's a lower competition load. What you want is when you don't have a lot of competition. That's good. That's a good thing in business, right? And so they'll actually use that filter to see who would I be competing with. If I'm a 2 year authority, don't call that new authority tenure load, because guess who else is calling that? All the new guys, right? And maybe they're willing to do it for a little lower price than you, and that price runs down. So, anyways, I guess the point being is that there are tools out there too to help you in markets like this, that help you get more competitive, that help you spend your time on freight that you can actually win and that you can qualify for. So there's nuances to this, right? It's just a business plan and then figure out what the right tools are for you. And of course, if Truckstop is the right tool for you, we'd be thrilled to have you and to work with you to help you find freight to keep you rolling.
There it is. Truckstop.com is the place to start that journey, right, Sean?
That's right.
That's right. All right. Well, hey, we really appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon. Maybe when the second quarter sentiment report comes out, we'll check in with you and
Yeah,
see how
would
people
love
are
to.
feeling then. All
Yeah,
right. Hey,
yeah, we'll
Sean,
see.
thank you so much. Really do appreciate your time.
Thank you, Scott. Take care.